organised, acquisitive crime is hitting rural communities hard, with high-value agricultural equipment targeted for theft. Recently, the National Rural Crime Unit have recovered over £5 million of stolen equipment, nearly £1 million of which was recovered abroad. Construction Plant Hire Association, NFU Mutual and Construction Equipment Association have put significant funds into the NRCU. But what more can my right honourable friend do to ensure the National Rural Crime Unit have the resources they need to tackle these serious organised criminal gangs?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for the work that he's done in this area, including his private members' bill. He is absolutely right that the rural communities of this country need to be supported, and they will be. Driving down rural crime is an important area of work, and we've provided £200,000 of funding to help set up the National Rural Crime Unit. I and he and others in this House understand the terrible impact this has, and we will continue to work with the rural police forces to drive down this issue.
Anthony Higginbottom.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Burnley and indeed right across Lancashire, county lines continues to be a problem, with organised groups peddling drugs, exploiting young people with no regard for the harm they're doing, not just to the communities, but to the young people they're exploiting too. Now, Lancashire Police are making really good inroads with an enhanced road policing unit and with neighbourhood task forces, but could the Secretary of State set out what more the Lancashire Constabulary can do to tackle county lines and bring order back to our streets?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for highlighting this vile type of criminality targeting the young and the most vulnerable. As part of our fight against county lines, we're investing up to £145 million in our County Lines programme. And since the County Lines programme was launched in 2019, police activity has resulted in over 4,700 county lines being closed, over 14,800 arrests, and over 7,200 safeguard referrals. We will keep our focus on this evil criminality.
Dame Nia Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, given that, shockingly, the average time it takes for a crime to be charged has trebled since 2016, will the Secretary of State embrace the Police Federation's Simplify DG6 campaign and scrap the redaction rules his government introduced in 2020 in order to cut bureaucracy, get cases to the Crown Prosecution Service more quickly and free up officers' time to be out fighting crime?
Yeah. Secretary of State.
We are actively working with the CPS to simplify and speed up this process. I will look, of course, at the proposals put forward because, of course, we want police officers out in their communities, on the beat, tackling crime rather than doing paperwork. Important though that is.
Chris Elmore.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the police report a 25% increase in shoplifting in recent months. There is much evidence the Home Secretary will be aware that organised criminal gangs go into shops to try and steal as much as they can and target shop workers. As we approach Christmas, but not just at Christmas, all across the year, what assurance can the Secretary of State provide to shop workers that he will start dealing with these gangs and start realising that all retail crime is a problem in this country that needs tackling?
Secretary of State.
He is absolutely right to highlight this as an issue. It is one that we take seriously through Operation Pegasus. We are working through the leadership of the PCC for Sussex on this very issue, and I will no doubt either myself or the Policing Minister give the opportunity to update the House on this work as it progresses.
Shadow Minister Alex Norris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This autumn, the Government pledged to treat retail crime as organised crime. But with their criminal justice bill, they've fallen at the first hurdle. No consolidated offence to protect retail workers, no strong signal on the £200 limit on investigations, and a denial of reality on their hollowing out of neighbourhood policing. I think from the answers we've heard, the Home Secretary wants us to believe that we've never had it so good, but the ones that are thriving are organised criminals. Will the Government accept our amendments to add protection of shop workers into this legislation?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman will know that it's already a statutory aggravating factor. We of course will look at what more that we can do to protect shop workers. The Retail Action Plan is in place, including the use of CCTV, face recognition software. We will continue to explore all avenues to protect shop workers, because they do, like everyone else, deserve our protection.
Jill Mortimer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Question 2, please.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to group this question with question 10. So far this year, we've reduced the number of these dangerous, illegal and completely unnecessary crossings by more than a third compared to last year, despite increases of nearly a third in Europe. Nevertheless, the numbers of illegal arrivals remain unacceptably high. We remain focused on delivering our comprehensive plan to stop the boats by breaking the business model of the people smugglers, and will shortly be piloting emergency legislation through this House to ensure flights to Rwanda take off as a matter of urgency.
Jill Mortimer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As figures on Thursday revealed, immigration to the UK is skyrocketing. Is it time to realise that there's well-intentioned international treaties and conventions agreed 70 years ago are no longer fit for purpose? We simply cannot accommodate all those who would qualify for asylum under existing rules. The world is facing troubled times and more mass migration. Will my right honourable friend assure me he will do all he can to raise the bar for those seeking asylum or migration here, and look at other solutions to stop people leaving their homelands, so those countries can make better futures for themselves without the loss of so many of their young? Much of Europe is in a dire state because of mass immigration. We cannot let the United Kingdom go the same way.
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend makes a very strong point. Whilst some of those coming here to claim asylum do have genuine grounds for asylum, many are economic migrants, making spurious claims to game the system. For some nationalities, our grant rates are out of sync with European countries, and that's why we've undertaken extensive work to lower them. For example, the grant rate for Albanians reduced from 53% in June of last year to 19% in June of this year, and has fallen further since, as this remains unacceptably high. Last month, we added India and Georgia to the list of safe states to speed up the process of returning people who've travelled from those countries to the United Kingdom illegally. Quite clearly, there is more work to be done, and we don't want to create any additional pull factor to the United Kingdom.
James Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In relation to the Rwanda policy, the Home Secretary was quoted as saying that my frustration is that we have allowed the narrative to be created that this was to be the be-all and end-all of government policy. Would the Minister agree with the Home Secretary? And if he does agree with the Home Secretary, what is the government's policy in relation to combating the boats and resisting illegal migration? And what is our policy?
Well, when my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, and I set out our comprehensive plan this time last year, it had many facets, one of which, and an extremely important component of which, was our Rwanda plan. But it was not the only element of our plan. And we have worked intensively over the course of the last 12 months on each and every other facet of that plan. And those on the opposite benches jeer, but is that plan working? Yes, it is. And you can see that from the fact that we are almost the only country in Europe where the number of illegal entrants is falling. It has fallen by more than a third, compared to a 30% increase in the rest of Europe, and almost a 100% increase in Italy. Now, none of that negates the importance of interjecting a further critical deterrent. And that is the crucial element of the Rwanda scheme. And that is the difference between those on this side and the opposition. Because, frankly, they don't want to stop the boats, and they don't have the stomach to do a policy like Rwanda.
Shadow Minister Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Speaker, since the previous Home Secretary was removed from her post, I think it's fair to say that the Immigration Minister has become a law unto himself. First, he briefed the media that he's been instructing the Prime Minister to tear up all our legal obligations in order to fix the unfixable Rwanda policy. Then he set himself on a collision course with his new Home Secretary by appearing to bet the house on the Rwanda flight taking off. And to add insult to injury, he went behind his new boss's back to present his laundry list to the Prime Minister, including a cap on social care visas and abolishing the shortage occupation list. Does the Immigration Minister have any respect whatsoever for the authority of the new Home Secretary? And given that he's said to be on resignation watch, can he confirm that he will resign if his proposals are rejected?
Well, once again, we heard absolutely nothing from the benches opposite about what they would actually do. The sad truth is they have complete disdain for the British public. They do not appreciate that the public that we're sent here to represent want us, demand that we reduce the levels of both legal and illegal migration. The Home Secretary and I will do absolutely everything in our power to achieve that. We're working closely with the Prime Minister and we'll be setting out further plans in due course. But the public watching this debate should be very clear. If they share our determination to tackle small boats or to reduce the numbers arriving in this country legally, they only have the Conservative Party to support.
SNP spokesman Alison Thewlis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A woman and a man died last week attempting to cross the Channel in a small boat. Others in their group were hospitalised for hypothermia. Despite the clear risks, over 400 people in 9 boats were detected crossing the Channel in the past 7 days. They clearly felt there was no other choice. The lack of safe and legal routes is putting people at risk. So I ask the Immigration Minister, will he consider a humanitarian visa as the Red Cross have recommended?
Hear, hear. Minister.
Well, firstly, I think all of us across the House abhor the death of individuals in the Channel, and we're working very closely with the French authorities to investigate the circumstance of those individuals' deaths. But those individuals, like anyone seeking to cross the Channel, are coming from a place of evident safety. They're departing from France. They are in absolutely no danger. They're in a country with a fully functioning asylum system of its own. There is no excuse for those people breaking into our country, putting themselves at the hands of people smugglers, and we should be united in trying to deter that. With respect to the second question that the Honourable Lady raised about the safe and legal routes to the UK, she knows that we have issued more than 500,000 humanitarian visas since 2015, more than at any time in the history of this country. And if she wants to do more, she should go straight back after this debate to the SNP government and ask them to pull their weight and provide more safe spaces for asylum seekers and refugees back in Scotland.
Alison Thewlis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, he's deflecting quite a lot here, because in the first 9 months, they would do well to listen to this, actually, because their systems are not working. They are failing people every single day. In the first 9 months of 2023, a mere 279 Afghans arrived in the UK by safe and legal routes. For each one of those, 17 Afghans came across by small boats. The Independent today has laid out the story of a mother of 4, an Afghan Special Forces soldier who served in a unit set up by Britain, trained and paid for by the British Armed Services, whose application under ARAP was denied, along with many others from CF 333 and ATF 444. So can I ask him, why is he failing so many Afghans?
Minister.
Well, firstly, we don't encourage anyone, whatever their circumstances are, to come across illegally in a small boat. That is a criminal offence, and it should not be encouraged. We have supported almost 25,000 people to come from Afghanistan since the end of the war in Afghanistan, which compares extremely favourably to other European countries. We've issued more than 500,000 humanitarian visas, and that's a record we should all be proud of. The SNP always want to make the UK out to be a small country. That's not correct. The United Kingdom is a big-hearted country that is one of the world's leading countries for resettlement.
Thank you. We've been here for 20 minutes. We've only covered 2 questions. We've got a huge amount of business to get through today. Can we please go faster? Brief questions, brief answers. Kat Smith.
Question number 3.
Minister Tugendhat.
It's a great pleasure to be able to tell the Honourable Lady that the Defending Democracy Task Force, which is set up under the National Security Council, has been operating for about a year now and working very closely with parliamentary authorities and authorities of devolved administrations and local authorities around the country, alongside, of course, intelligence agencies, the police, and opposite numbers from various different parties, has already updated many individuals across this House on different ways in which we can keep our own security improved and in making sure that this country's democracy is safer. Of course, the fundamental way to protect our democracy is to get involved. So to anybody watching, please join a party, any party, particularly the Conservative Party. Get involved in politics. Keep the government of the United Kingdom working for the people of the United Kingdom by being involved.
Kat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the huge importance of preventing foreign interference in our democracy, would the Minister agree with me that for the purposes of transparency, Lord Cameron should declare all previous contacts with and monies earned from foreign governments after the period of him leaving office of Prime Minister and being appointed as Foreign Secretary?
Well, I'm delighted to say that the Honourable Lady raises some very interesting points on how we keep our politics accountable, and the rules set out by this House and indeed by Ipswich and various other people on how we account for expenses, how we account for money raised, how we account for various different forms of connections are already set out, not just for this House but for the other place. And of course she's right that those records must be kept up to date, and I know that the Prime Minister expects every minister to do so. I'm very confident that the new Foreign Secretary, congratulations, has done that.
Shadow Minister Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Defending Democracy Task Force has an important remit to defend our country and protect our sovereignty. Given the threats we face, it's vital that rapid progress is made. Some matters, however, require immediate attention. So, can the Minister give an assurance that both the Three Vodafone merger and the future ownership of the Daily Telegraph will be looked at not just through the economic prism of competition, but also in accordance with the National Security and Investment Act?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend, it's the first time we've faced each other across this dispatch box, and last time we were side by side, so it's a bit of a change. But he raises some very interesting points and very important points, and that's why the National Security and Investment Act was passed only a year or so ago, a little over a year ago, and why the Deputy Prime Minister himself is chairing the body that advises on it. Now, that's incredibly important because, as we know, foreign ownership and foreign control is a vital area of foreign influence in our government and, of course, in our society. And that's why we're looking not just at that, but also at the ways in which foreign media today doesn't just mean the traditional media, some of whom we see represented up there. And there we go, some of them are even waving. But also the way in which we see social media now being so important. It's worth noting the recent Ofcom report that about a third of under-25s gets their news from TikTok, which, as we know, has its algorithm written by individuals who are under control of a foreign state, and indeed one that isn't always friendly.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Question 4.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there's a number of routes in the immigration rules allowing dependents to join family members in the United Kingdom. Where possible, people seeking to flee conflict zones should use these existing routes. In the last 12 months, we've allowed over 112,000 people to arrive under safe and legal routes, including over 6,000 family reunion cases.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent is on a student visa at St Andrews University, and her 5-year-old daughter on the day of 7th of October was in northern Gaza staying with her grandmother. They've since had to flee south. We've had good engagement from the student policy team, but would the Minister meet with me to discuss how we can reunify this family?
Minister.
Well, I'd be very happy to look into the case with the Honourable Lady. I would say as a general rule that we believe that migration shouldn't be the first lever that we pull in the event of humanitarian crises. We should be using the UK's diplomatic muscle, our overseas development aid, as the primary way in which the UK can have the greatest impact in the world, but there's always cases where we would make exceptions.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week's net migration figures were completely unacceptable to the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork, which is why the New Conservatives have helpfully got a 12-point plan that the Minister for Immigration could copy and paste in order to make sure that we get those figures down. So will he extend the closure of the student-dependent route to students enrolled on a one-year research master's degree?
Minister.
Well, firstly, we believe that the level of legal migration into this country is far too high and has very profound impacts upon access to public services, upon the productivity of our economy, and about the ability of the UK to be a socially cohesive and united country, and that's why we need to take action. We have already announced a specific policy with respect to dependents, which comes into force at the beginning of next year. We think that will have a substantive impact upon the levels of net migration, but as the Prime Minister has said, we're keeping all options under review and will take further action as required.
Heather Wheeler.
Number 5, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For the first time since the small boats crisis began, we are now closing asylum hotels, thanks to the good work that's been done to reduce arrivals by more than a third, the delivery of more appropriate forms of accommodation, such as on large disused military sites, and better management of the existing permanent estate. I'm pleased to report the Home Office is making good progress on the first 50 hotels, which will exit by the end of January, and will be bringing forward a further tranche shortly.
Heather Wheeler.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for his reply. On behalf of constituents who have asked me, can he go further and give a more definite date when the Newton Park Hotel in South Derbyshire will start and complete the decant of asylum seekers, please?
Well, when I first took this job, I was clear that the use of asylum hotels was completely unacceptable, and that I would work with all in government to ensure that we closed each and every one of them as quickly as possible. We're now in the process of closing those hotels. As I said in my opening remarks, the first 50 are closing seamlessly, and so I expect to be in a position to announce the next set of hotel closures very soon.
Patrick Grady.
Madam Deputy Speaker, surely if asylum seekers had the right to work, they would be able to pay for their own accommodation at little or no cost to the taxpayer.
No, I completely disagree with the honourable gentleman. I think it's extremely important that we reduce the pull factors to the United Kingdom. There are already plenty of reasons why economic migrants would want to make a life in the UK, and enabling them to work as soon as they arrive here would only exacerbate those problems.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you. I'm really pleased that the government has been able to reduce the number of asylum seekers in hotels. The use of the Atlantic Hotel in Chelmsford for families is putting considerable pressure on our school places, especially as Chelmsford is already very short of school places due to the large numbers of people who have arrived from Ukraine and elsewhere. So will he look again at that policy and make sure that when people are placed in hotels where they have children of school age, they are put in places where there are schools that have places?
Well, my right honourable friend and I have discussed this many times, and I want to ensure that that particular hotel is closed as quickly as possible because it is having such an impact upon her local community. The Home Office is working with her local authority, and we have made a commitment that we will not place further young people or families with young people in that hotel if there are not school places readily available. But I hope, of course, that the hotel itself will close very soon.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Asylum seekers requiring medical care, when they are moved to a new location out of area, they go to the bottom of their waiting list. As a result of that, their health requirements are not met in a timely way. How will he ensure that they do not slip back with the medical care which they urgently require?
Minister.
Well, we do make provision when moving asylum seekers from one form of accommodation to another to ensure that there is support for those people with the most serious medical conditions. But it is important that we're able to move individuals around the estate, and we are at the moment in the process of closing hotels, and that is our #1 priority because the public want us to close those as quickly as possible.
Miriam Cates.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Question 6, please.
Minister.
Still a minister. But with permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will answer questions 6 and 9 together. The government has a plan to tackle illegal migration across a number of methods. That plan is working. Small boat crossings are down compared with other countries across Europe where they are up. We are working closely with international partners, of course, including France, our nearest geographical neighbour. We are dismantling the organised criminal gangs that are smuggling people, and we are taking action to reform the asylum system.
Miriam Cates.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Following the Supreme Court ruling, the Government has announced emergency legislation to address the issues mentioned in the judgment. Now, I welcome the proposed new treaty with Rwanda, but does my right honourable friend agree with me that this new legislation promised by the Prime Minister must be clear and unambiguous in establishing that the sovereign will of this Parliament, as expressed in primary legislation, takes legal precedence over the interpretation of international treaties and principles?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can assure my honourable friend that the excellent working relationship we have with Rwanda, one that indeed I worked on in my former role, will give us the opportunity to have a treaty that addresses the issues in the Supreme Court judgment. But she is absolutely right that the legislation that will go along with this needs to make it absolutely clear that the will of the British people, as exemplified by the actions of this government, mean that we will work to get flights to Rwanda to make it clear that if people come here illegally, they will not stay here. And I can give her my commitment that we'll do everything we can to make that happen.
Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And further to those points, will my right honourable friend give me the categorical reassurance that he will do everything possible so that we can deliver the Rwanda policy, and that he will ensure that we put in place all the necessary legal exemptions so that we can get on with those flights as soon as possible to give the deterrence that we need to illegal migration?
Secretary of State.
The Rwanda scheme is an incredibly important part of a wide... the Rwanda scheme is an incredibly important part of the basket of responses that we have. I will do everything to ensure that we drive down small boat arrivals. That is the promise that we have made to the British people, and that is the commitment that I will deliver.
Valerie Vance.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the ways to deal with illegal migration is to look at the number of cases. So could the Home Secretary say, in the legacy backlog, how many of those, if they've been triaged yet, how many legacy backlog cases there are, and how many of those are from illegal migration?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the backlog has been reduced. The historic backlog has been reduced by 65%. It has fallen by over 59,000 cases at the end, compared to the end of November 2022. We've recruited 2,500 asylum decision makers. We have increased tenfold the pace at which these decisions are made.
Peter Grant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State is well aware that under international law, an asylum seeker cannot be described as an illegal immigrant. They are here legally until and unless they are found to have no valid claim for asylum after due process. Is it the policy of the Home Office of this Government to act within international law or to act out with it?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Refugee Convention that he makes reference to, his definition is only accurate if they come directly from a place of danger. I have visited France. It is a wonderful country, and I can assure the House it is not a dangerous country.
Julie Marson.
Question 7, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
In the last 3 years, we have passed comprehensive new laws covering everything from domestic abuse, street harassment to online safety. Last year, the government added violence against women to the strategic policing requirement, placing it on an equivalent footing to terrorism. And the Home Office's award-winning Enough campaign is now entering its final phase with a firm focus on tackling perpetrator behaviour being rolled out across colleges and universities.
Julie Marson.
I thank my honourable friend for her reply and welcome her to her place. I'd also like to pay tribute to Sandra Conte and her team at Future Living in Hertford for everything they do to support victims of domestic abuse. As a magistrate, I specialised in domestic abuse courts and am utterly convinced of their value for both justice and for victims. Can my honourable friend share any assessment of initiatives to increase specialisation in court processes for sexual offending and sexual violence?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. The Specialist Sexual Violence Support Project is now underway in Crown Courts in Leeds, Newcastle and Snaresbrook. It's at an early stage, but it is due to report in early 2025. However, my honourable friend should be aware that for any victim of rape or sexual assault, they are now able to take advantage of Section 28 procedures, which have been rolled out nationwide and allow them to give their evidence privately and ahead of trial. And also, we are engaging close to 1,000 independent sexual violence advisors in the system to accompany victims every step of the way through the criminal justice system. As a result, rape prosecutions are today higher than they were in 2010 and sentences approximately 50% longer.
Tonya Antoniazzi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister tell me how many forces still aren't providing domestic abuse training to their officers?
Minister.
I don't have that answer, actually, and I will have to go back to the Home Office and write to her.
Shadow Minister Alex Davis-Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a privilege to take on this important role, and may I pass on my thanks to my friend, the Honourable Member for Birmingham Yardley, for her dedication and commitment. I am looking forward to getting to work. Madam Deputy Speaker, a shocking new study has found that domestic abusers are controlling the finances of more than 5 million women in the UK. This cannot be allowed to continue. The government have turned a blind eye to this issue for more than a decade. So what steps is the Minister taking today to tackle economic abuse?
Minister.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. We've worked together on domestic abuse a lot, actually, since we've both come in. She will know that economic abuse is basically a derivative of coercive control, which Claire Wade, KC, in her review of domestic homicide, says underpins almost all domestic abuse. Tomorrow, the Criminal Justice Bill has its second reading in the House, which will see serious coercive control offences treated by being placed under the multi-agency public protection arrangements and offenders placed on the violent, sexual and terrorist offender register.
Stephen Bonner.
Number 8, please.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Rwanda scheme remains an important part of our response to illegal migration and people smuggling. We will continue to negotiate with the government of Rwanda on a treaty which will be underpinned by domestic law so that the Rwanda scheme will join the other effective parts of our response in stopping the boats.
Stephen Bonner.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has indicated his intention to override the Supreme Court by introducing emergency laws and a new treaty with Rwanda to save his unlawful deportation plans. So far, the UK has paid the Rwandan government £140 million, amid the Home Office spending £1.4 million on failed legal challenges, with no asylum seeker being sent there as of yet. In total, the question is, how much has the Home Office spent during the Rwanda legal case? Can you give us a figure, please?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the funding of the Home Office will be reported in the usual and the appropriate way. I don't have the figures to this hand, but I will make sure that the House will be updated of the costs. The honourable gentleman seems to misunderstand how one responds to a legal judgment. He describes it being overriding. I would suggest when the Supreme Court sets down a number of issues which needs to be addressed, that when the government addresses those issues, it is not overriding, it is respecting the voice of the Supreme Court. And the point I would make with regards to our position of illegal migrants is that we are committed to dealing with it. I hear no such commitment from the opposite benches. And until they do come up with clear plans for how they will deal with this issue, I think they should support the actions the government is actually taking.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Has the Home Secretary been struck, as I have, by the very small number of opposition members standing to contribute to questions on migration? And does he agree with me that if the democracies, both within the EU and, like ourselves, outside it, cannot find a solution to this problem, what we will see is the increasing emergence of far-right politicians in positions of power in our democracies, and that is something that ought to frighten us all.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. When this party, when this government started to take action to address the significant increase in the volumes of illegal migration, we were criticised by the benches opposite and indeed other voices around the continent. Now, countries across the continent are looking at us to see how we are taking action so they can emulate the actions that we are taking. It has gone from something which the party opposite believed was a non-issue to being a core issue in European governments and indeed in North America. If the good people don't grip this issue, the bad people will attempt to do so, and I will never let that happen.
Select Committee Chairman, Dame Diana Johnson.
Deputy Speaker, the Select Committee has taken a particular interest in the small boat crossings. We produced a report last year which I would suggest that the new Home Secretary might want to take a look at. We've also visited France and Belgium this year as well. I wondered, because of our interest, whether the Home Secretary might consider giving the Home Affairs Select Committee and the Joint Committee on Human Rights the opportunity to carry out some pre-legislative scrutiny of any emergency legislation that he plans to bring forward to use our expertise in this area.
Good idea. Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there is an urgency to the legislation we're seeking to put forward, and whilst pre-legislative scrutiny does have a part to play, I will not do anything that will delay the implementation of this incredibly important legislation.
Sir Simon Clarke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If we are to crack the business model of the evil people smugglers, it is imperative we operationalise the Rwanda scheme. And can I just register my profound conviction that disapplication of elements of the ECHR and the refugee conventions will be necessary. The Court of Appeal cited human rights, the Supreme Court cited refoulement. What will it be next time in the absence of Parliament expressly asserting the will of this House?
Secretary of State.
My right honourable friend does make an incredibly important point. I don't want to prejudge the content of the bill. I listened very carefully to the points that he has made, and he and the rest of the House should understand that we will do everything we can to ensure that we break the business model of the evil people smugglers that he highlights, that we drive down the small boat arrivals, and he is absolutely right. The deterrent effect of Rwanda is a key element to that multi-strand approach.
Peter Aldous.
Number 12, please, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I thank my honourable friend, the member for Waveney, for his question. He's a tireless campaigner on this issue. I completely accept the need for a new police funding formula. It's something we've been working on extremely hard, working with colleagues across government, and I hope to have something to say further on the topic very shortly. In the meantime, we are getting as much money as we can to frontline policing. This year, an extra £550 million to frontline policing, and in addition to that, £330 million to support the police pay rise, making £880 million extra for policing this year.
Peter Aldous.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm most grateful to my honourable friend for that answer. It is nevertheless concerning that Suffolk Police were promised draft proposals for the review back in January, and I would urge my right honourable friend to get these to them as quickly as possible, and in the meantime work with the force to improve the number of out-of-court disposals where better delivery will relieve pressure on the local force who are working incredibly hard.
Minister.
Well, they are indeed working incredibly hard, and I'm delighted to tell the House that the Suffolk Police have currently 1,425 officers. That is more than they've ever had at any time in their history, in common with England and Wales as a whole. I do support what he said about out-of-court disposals. They've got an important role to play, particularly when it comes to treating drug and alcohol addiction and mental health issues, and I will work with Suffolk and other forces to make sure they are widely used.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Since 2010, neighbourhood policing, where officers are embedded in local communities, has been decimated, despite the huge advantages. We therefore desperately need the repeatedly promised reform of the police funding formula. But one of the quickest ways that the government can get cash to police forces for neighbourhood policing is reforming pocket rules, so that more of the money that is confiscated is handed to the police forces who confiscated it. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss this further?
Well, I would be very happy to discuss POCA with the Honourable Gentleman and other colleagues. But on this question about neighbourhood policing, there is something of a definitional confusion, because there are local police officers who work on response teams that should be counted as well. And if you look at people in local policing roles, in 2015, the figure the opposition keep, or the year rather, the opposition keep referring to, there were 61,083 officers in local policing roles. There are now 67,785, a much higher number. And overall, we have record ever numbers of officers across England and Wales, 149,566. That is more than there ever were under the last Labour government.
We must move now to topical questions. Judith Cummins.
Topical number 1, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My mission, the mission of this government on behalf of all people in this country, is to secure our borders, keep people safe from crime and from terrorism. Good progress has been made in driving down crime and stopping illegal small boat arrivals, but there, of course, is more to do. The Home Office has been considering further measures to mitigate migration, including the prevention of exploitation and manipulation of our visa system, and to clamp down on those that take unwarranted advantage of the flexibilities that we provide. We will announce further details of these measures in due course. Tomorrow we have the second reading of the Criminal Justice Bill, the Criminal Justice Bill, giving police the powers they need for longer sentences for those who would harm others and increase the trust in policing.
Judith Cummins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my constituency of Bradford South, the antisocial and illegal use of fireworks continues to affect law-abiding citizens and our pets. So will the Minister commit to reducing the legal decibel limit of commercial fireworks from 120 to 90 decibels or less?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not an issue I have yet had the opportunity to read into. It wasn't the angle that I was expecting at this question. But I will. I mean, it seems a thoughtful proposal. I will give it due consideration, but I can't make a commitment at this point.
Jill Mortimer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Off-road bikes are a growing plague across Hartlepool. And my constituents face the danger of young men in balaclavas driving recklessly along our streets. Will my right honourable friend commit to increasing support for Cleveland Police to tackle this nuisance beyond the anonymous tip-off system, and perhaps come and visit some of the excellent Conservative MPs in our region?
Well, I would be delighted to do that, and yes, I do support her call. In fact, precisely to achieve the objectives she's describing, from April next year, just a few months' time, every police force in the country will receive very substantial funding commitments to conduct antisocial behaviour hotspot patrols, including against the scourge of off-road biking she mentions. And in those pilot forces where it's been tried so far, places like Essex, Lancashire and Staffordshire, we have seen reductions in antisocial behaviour of up to 30%.
Shadow Secretary of State, Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary has been in post 2 weeks, in which he's found the same language to pick a fight with Stockton and show what he thinks of his own Rwanda policy. He's been attacked by his backbenchers, and Downing Street's already been forced to confirm they still have full confidence in him. 12 days ago, he said asylum hotel bed spaces are down. 4 days ago, Home Office figures showed they are up to a record 56,000, 10,000 more than the beginning of the year. Does he even know what is going on?
Yeah. Secretary of State.
Yes, I do. But let me expand on that. Let me expand. It's a byproduct of asking a closed question at the dispatch box. I've been in this job 14 days. And I am conscious that many of my counterparts around the world and around Europe are grappling with many of the same issues. I would love nothing more than to be able to resolve them all in 14 days. I'm good, but I'm not a magician.
Yvette Cooper.
That means an end to the magical thinking that his predecessor called for then. We've still got 10,000 more than when the Prime Minister promised to end hotel use. He owes the House the facts. There's still no sign of anything on their failed Rwanda plan because he knows it won't work. Nothing on the trebling of net migration to tackle the skills gaps that are driving work visas. They've been in power for 13 years and all we've got is chaos and briefing wars. His backbenchers are already calling him Colonel Calamity. He's got Corporal Chaos next to him on the benches. Given the mess he's inherited and his penchant for profanity, does he accept he's now up a certain kind of creek without a paddle?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady is someone I admire hugely, and one of the things that I admire most is about how she managed now to be at the dispatch box 2 times and failed to ask anything resembling a sensible question about the issues that we are discussing here. When her party was in government, they addressed the volumes of migrations by simply redefining those people, wiping the slate clean and pretending there was never a problem. I've said it about the Honourable Lady's party on broadcast. I'll say it here at the dispatch box. There is a vacuum, a gaping vacuum where the Labour Party's policy on migration, whether it be legal or illegal, stands. And unless and until they come up with something approaching a policy, I will continue to do what we know to be right, driving down small boat arrivals, reducing the number of hotel rooms that are needed. We've closed 50, and we will do more.
Sir Desmond Sway.
Is he doing enough to reassure Jews that the United Kingdom is safe?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend asks an incredibly important question, and I have made it very, very clear to the police forces of the UK that when a minority group in this country tells us they are living in fear, that we must take action. I'm pleased that the policing response this weekend was more robust than in previous weekends. The police are clearly listening to the conversations that we are having with them, and I commend them for doing so. I've spoken with the Community Security Trust, I've spoken with representatives of the Board of Deputies, and I will also be having a meeting with the Chief Rabbi to make it absolutely clear that the Jewish community in the UK has the right to feel safe, and this government will take action to ensure they are safe.
Vicky Foxcroft.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of my constituents have faced significant delays when applying for biometric resident permit cards because of technical errors. One constituent, whose application was approved in July 2020, did not receive their BRP until January 2023 because of printing issues. Now, I hope that the Home Secretary can answer this question. So what actions are being taken to address the technical problems contributing to delays in processing BRP applications?
Well, I'm pleased to report to the Honourable Lady that part of our Visa and Immigration Service is now operating within its service standard. So there is a good service being offered to members of the public. But if the Honourable Lady has specific cases, then please do bring them to my attention.
Steve Tuckwell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a local authority closely tied to Heathrow Airport, the London Borough of Hillingdon has been doing some great work to manage the impact of those currently in the asylum process. This is despite a funding imbalance in national rates linked between the local population and the numbers of asylum seekers. Therefore, would my right honourable friend commit to work with me to look at how we can ensure those authorities, such as Hillingdon Council, linked with major ports of entry, are given the resources in order to cope with such demands?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend raises an important point for his constituents, and as the local authority beside Heathrow Airport, it is true that his constituents bear a particular burden with respect to asylum seekers. We do provide £3,500 per asylum seeker to a local authority to help meet those costs, but a local authority like Hillingdon does need our support, and I'd be delighted to work with him in that regard.
Quickly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Home Secretary will be familiar with the invasive surveillance systems that authoritarian states like Russia and China impose on their citizens. Is he comfortable with his colleague, the Police and Minister's push for similar live facial recognition systems to be used on innocent Brits at a time when our colleagues in the European Parliament are legislating to ban this technology?
Well, I think we should be clear, firstly, that retrospective facial recognition puts hundreds, if not thousands, of criminals in prison. For example, it was used to catch a murderer who had killed someone in a Coventry nightclub, who was then identified using an image taken on a mobile phone. That is a murderer who would not be in prison but for the use of retrospective facial recognition. Now, in relation to live facial recognition, that has been used extensively by 2 police forces and experimentally by 2 others, including by South Wales, which has an excellent Labour Police and Crime Commissioner, Alan Michaels, who has actually led the way in this area, in a way that is safe, in a way that respects privacy, and critically, if someone's face is scanned and they are not on the wanted list, their details are immediately deleted, which I hope gives reassurance on the questions of privacy. Where it has been used, wanted people, including a wanted rapist, including a wanted sex offender, have been apprehended who otherwise would have gone free. And I would hope that the entire House can agree that catching wanted rapists is something we can all get behind.
Cheryl Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. During the recent protests, we've seen politicians hounded at their office and even need a police escort at a train station. What more can we do to ensure that people that make decisions are doing it fairly and not from intimidation?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady makes an excellent point, and this is exactly why we're having an emergency meeting of the Defending Democracy Task Force tomorrow to assess some of these issues. And because of the incidents in this country since the 7th of October, absolutely hateful incidents which have left some people feeling unable to make the arguments that their constituents would expect them to make because they feel vulnerable or they feel threatened. It's exactly why I've been engaging on a protective security review, not just for the government, but actually for all members of this House and for other elected officials around our country. It is completely wrong that our democracy should be silenced by anyone, and certainly not by cowards.
Peter Grant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent, Dr Lubna Hadura, has given almost 30 years of service in a specialised role to our NHS. Today, all she can think about is her 84-year-old mum and other members of her family who are stuck in Gaza with no hope of escape. Will the Secretary of State agree to meet urgently with me and with Dr Hadura so that she can set out to him, more powerful than I ever could, the urgent humanitarian and moral imperative to get the families of UK citizens out of Gaza before it's too late?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the government, of course, has a duty that we take very, very seriously to British nationals. I recognise the plight of many non-British nationals in Gaza, which is why, in my previous role and now supporting the current Foreign Secretary, we have long pushed for a humanitarian pause. I'm pleased that is in place, and we will continue to work with the international community and the countries in the region to ensure that support is given for the people in Gaza that need it, and that action is taken to end this conflict such that Israelis can live in peace and security, and so can the Palestinian people.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we seek to reduce the backlog of asylum claims, there is a temptation to grant more economic migrants the right to remain here. Will my right honourable friend give an assurance to the House there will be no slackening of the rules to root out economic migrants so they can be returned from where they came?
Secretary of State.
The whole point of having border control is that we can ensure that our migration system supports our economy, but also our social cohesion, and both of those things are important. We want to make sure that we are choosing the right people in the right numbers at the right pace, and I can give him and the House categoric assurance that will always underpin our thinking with regard to what future changes we might make to the legal migration processes.
Kenny McCaskill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's not simply the decimal level of fireworks that's causing an issue. Police officers in Scotland have been coming under attack with fireworks used as weapons. The Scottish Parliament has control over the sale of fireworks, but not over their manufacturers. Fireworks are classified as an explosive. Will the Minister give a guarantee that steps will be taken to tighten up to reduce these weapons? Which failing, will they just simply devolve the powers so the Scottish Parliament can act as we've done so on air weapons and indeed on drink driving?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for raising this important point. The control of products often is a matter for the Department of Business and Trade, but since he's raised it in Home Office questions, I will very happily take his point away and look into it very carefully.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As was referenced earlier, there's growing concern in the retail chain about the increases in shoplifting and in particular violence against shop workers. Would the Minister agree that we need custodial sentences for persistent offenders?
Minister.
Well, persistent offenders should most certainly get sent to prison, no question about that at all. And of course, it is now a statutory aggravating factor if the victim of an assault is a retail worker. We are concerned, though, about retail crime. We do not want to end up where some American cities like San Francisco are, with sort of out-of-control looting. We want a zero-tolerance approach, and that is why we have launched with police just a few weeks ago a retail crime action plan that will see police always follow up evidence, including CCTV evidence, including the use of facial recognition. They will always attend where necessary to investigate or where someone's been assaulted, and they will particularly target prolific offenders and criminal gangs.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the revelations in recent weeks that the Home Secretary's predecessor struck a deal with the Prime Minister before she took up the post, and given that it's well known that the Home Secretary was very much enjoying his role as Foreign Secretary, could he tell the House what deal he might have struck with the Prime Minister before taking on this role?
Secretary of State.
A fantastic question, well worth asking. The deal that all ministers, the contract that all ministers have is with the British people. It is to work hard on their behalf, to focus relentlessly on their priorities, something that every minister on my side of the House takes seriously, and something totally lacking in the narrative coming from the opposition benches, including his own.
And the final topical question, Siobhan Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The award-winning Cotswold Canal Trust volunteers have had enough of antisocial behaviour like graffiti, dog mess and worrying drug paraphernalia everywhere. It's ruining their hard work on the canal network, and it's putting them at risk as well. Part of our successful approach of trying to tackle this is getting a CCTV down the canals. Now, will my right honourable friend let us know what's happening with the Safer Streets funding? Because myself and the PCC, Chris Nelson, have made an application and we've been waiting to hear from that.
Minister.
Well, there is a round of Safer Street funding that was distributed for the current financial year, and we're shortly going to make an announcement about the following financial year, so more money will be available, and it'll be up to the Police and Crime Commissioner to decide how they spend that money. We're also going to shortly be confirming the rollout of antisocial behaviour hotspot patrols across the entire country, across all 43 police forces in England and Wales. And where those have been trialled so far, in Essex, in Staffordshire, in Lancashire and elsewhere, we have seen 30% decreases in ASB, and pretty soon that'll be available in Gloucestershire as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. That concludes proceedings on questions. I'm pausing just momentarily to allow members to go to their places.
Tom.
Oh, point of order, Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Order. I will take points of order after the urgent question, unless it's directly relevant to what has just been said. Thank you.
This is directly associated with the Home Secretary.
It is not directly relevant to a question that has just been answered. No, thank you. Well, I'm guessing it is not directly relevant to a question that has just been answered. No. Order. We're moving on to a very important matter, and I expect the House to be quiet in order to listen to the urgent question from Mr. David Lammy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for the granting of this urgent question. Holding the government... can I ask the Secretary of State to answer a question on the Israel-Gaza situation and the humanitarian pause?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Shadow Foreign Secretary for this question. A tragedy, Madam Deputy Speaker, is unfolding in the Middle East. Israel has suffered the worst terror attack in its history, and Palestinian civilians are experiencing a devastating and growing humanitarian crisis. As the Foreign Secretary made clear, last week's agreement was a crucial step towards providing relief to the families of the hostages and addressing the humanitarian emergency in Gaza. This pause has provided an important opportunity to ensure much greater volumes of food, fuel and other life-saving aid can enter Gaza. On the 24th of November, the British government announced a further £30 million of humanitarian assistance, tripling our existing aid budget for the occupied Palestinian territories this financial year. During the pause, the fourth UK aircraft carrying 23 tonnes of humanitarian aid for Gaza arrived in Egypt, bringing the total amount of UK humanitarian aid provided via British aircraft to 74 tonnes. This aid is now being dispersed to the United Nations to support critical food, water, health, shelter and protection needs in Gaza and to pre-position emergency supplies in the region. Today is the fourth and final day of that agreement. The British government is supportive of the current pause in hostilities continuing, but that is for the Israelis and others in the region to agree. But we are clear this pause should not be a one-off. The increased flow of fuel and relief supplies over the Rafah crossing accompanying the pause was welcome and must be sustained. This pause should act as a confidence-building mechanism for future pauses, including those solely on humanitarian grounds. We welcome the intensive international cooperation, including efforts from Qatar and the USA leading to this agreement, and we thank partners for their continued work. We remain, Madam Deputy Speaker, committed to making the progress towards a two-state solution. Britain's long-standing position on the Middle East peace process is clear. We support a negotiated settlement leading to a safe and secure Israel, living alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. The UK will continue to work with all partners in the region to reach a long-term political solution which enables both Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace.
Shadow Secretary of State David Lammy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for the granting of this urgent question. Holding the government to account is a sacred duty of this House. But with the Lord of Chipping Norton, as you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, not here, this is feeling more like a game of Where's Wally? So can I start by asking the Minister what progress is being made with the Speaker to ensure all members can question the Foreign Secretary? Madam Deputy Speaker, the last 72 hours have brought much-needed relief to Israel and to Gaza. May I pay tribute to the work of Qatar, Egypt, the United States and the Red Cross. The images of hostages released and reunited with their families has moved us all. But it remains bittersweet, with many more still captive, their families in agony. In Gaza, the last few weeks have been an unimaginable nightmare for innocent Palestinians. The civil death toll, including thousands of women and children, has been shocking and intolerable. The increased flow of aid and fuel remains a fraction of what's required. More time is needed. We must now urgently support the parties to reach an agreement to extend the cessation of hostilities, to secure the release of remaining hostages, to deliver more aid to ease the unacceptable humanitarian catastrophe, and crucially to provide a stepping stone to an enduring cessation of hostilities, and ensuring that what follows the war is a durable political solution. But the danger is that the fighting resumes in mere hours. If the vital efforts to extend this cessation of hostilities fail, does my right honourable friend agree that we cannot return to the situation before this pause? We cannot go back to Hamas continuing rocket attacks on Israel, and we cannot go back to unacceptable siege conditions in Gaza, and we cannot go back to the scenes of thousands of innocent Palestinians being killed. Madam Deputy Speaker, the two-state solution remains the only credible basis for a lasting peace, a future in which Israel is secure from the threat of Hamas terrorists, a future in which Gaza is not occupied and its people are no longer displaced, a future in which Palestinians and Israelis can enjoy security, dignity and human rights.
Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the honourable gentleman for most of his comments, and in particular his desire to ensure that there is an extension in the cessation of hostilities. And what he said about the broader situation, the opposition front bench and the government are in complete agreement about that. He asks what progress has been made in ensuring that the Foreign Office and the government's foreign policy is subject to proper scrutiny in this House, and I completely agree with him that there is a sacred duty, I think was the term that he used, to ensure that all that scrutiny is made available. I would just point out to him that he will have seen from the recent visit to the Middle East by Lord Cameron the extraordinary authority that a former Prime Minister carrying out these tasks can bring to bear. He is the most senior Foreign Minister in Europe and indeed in the region. And I think the House on all sides will see the benefit of that in the days and months to come.
Select Committee Chairman, Alicia Kearns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a very serious matter. The UK's priority in the region is security and stability for the whole of the Middle East. Yet today Netanyahu plans to push forward with a special budget which will fund expansions of the settlements by over $80 million. As a friend, we have a duty to say to Israel, do not proceed with this plan. It takes us further away from peace, and frankly, it will risk not only the truce, but the ability to get home hostages who are still held by their terrorist kidnappers. What is my right honourable friend doing to make sure that we speak plainly to our friends?
Minister.
Well, I thank the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee for her comments. I mean, she is entirely right that Israel must comply with international humanitarian law and must not only prosecute but also punish those who have been involved in settler violence. So we are delivering tough messages to all sides in this dreadful conflict, and the government will continue to do so.
SNP spokesman Peter Grant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for his statement and can I commend the integrity and courage with which the last speaker raised her concerns as well. Does the Minister agree that the only way we will see a lasting and just peace in the Middle East is with the establishment of a two-state solution in which Israel and Palestine are recognised as equal sovereign states with equal rights and equal responsibilities to uphold international law? Given that there are now credible accusations of war crimes against both sides in this conflict, will the government confirm that it will give full support to the International Criminal Court to investigate without fear or favour all allegations of war crimes, regardless of who is accused of them, so that any perpetrator of a war crime, regardless of whose friend or foe they might be, is brought to justice before the international courts? Given that it is an offence in international law to supply weapons where they may be used in the commission of a war crime, what recent reassessment has the government made of the legality of its arms sales to the Middle East? And finally, I don't know if the Minister was here to hear my plea on behalf of my constituent, Dr Lubna Hadura. I've written to the Secretary of State Foreign Affairs specifically about her. Will he agree to meet urgently with me and with her and with the Home Secretary so that we can find an effective way to get the families of UK nationals who are still stuck in Gaza, get them out while the peace lasts, because if we don't get them out during a ceasefire, we might not get them out at all.
Minister.
Well, in respect of the International Criminal Court, both I and the Lord Chancellor have made clear what the position is. I said it out in the House. It is not for government ministers, politicians to address these matters. It is for the prosecutor and for the administration of the International Criminal Court. In terms of future thinking, which he quite rightly identifies as critical at this time, he will recall that the progress that was made at Oslo was on the back of the First Intifada. And I think that is something which should give us some confidence in these dreadful sets of circumstances, that we need to focus on the future, and a lot of thinking is going on in that respect. And in terms of his point about the arms regime, he will know that the British government has the toughest arms export regime in the world, and we adhere absolutely to that.
Tobias Elwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The whole House wants to see as many hostages released as possible and as much aid getting in during this lull in fighting, but both sides are committed to recommence fighting. Could I ask my honourable friend whether it's time to call for a demilitarisation of Gaza in the longer term, but also look at what is going to be the governance, the security and humanitarian plans for the future? Will he consider a joint summit with the United States, bringing together all stakeholders to look at the long-term implications as to where this conflict needs to result to?
Minister.
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right about the importance of looking to the medium term and the long term, and doing all that is necessary to bring together people of goodwill to make progress on the two-state solution. And the answer to his question, we want to see all hostages released as swiftly as possible, and we want to see greater volumes of food, fuel, medicine and life-saving supplies getting into Gaza, principally through Rafah, but also through any other plausible means that we can.
Sir Tony Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Is it the government's contention, I must ask the Minister, that the further hostilities, the destruction of the south of Gaza in the way we've seen the north destroyed, tens of thousands more killed, will lead easily to a permanent ceasefire, or will this simply embolden the militants?
He is right about the very worrying position that exists in the south of Gaza at the moment. He will have seen that the United Nations and others are looking at the possibility of islands of deconfliction, particularly around Khan Yunis, and the possibility that there could be safe zones there in order that aid can be dispensed. But he, like me, will be very aware of the dangers that have taken place in other safe zones in the past and the risks for civilians that are involved in that.
Sir Julian Lewis.
How can a two-state solution everybody says they want, in this chamber at any rate, ever come to pass whilst Hamas remains in control of the Gaza Strip?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think anyone thinks that Hamas is going to remain in charge of the Gaza Strip in the medium term or anything longer than that.
Sorry, what am I trying to say? That it's great when the Minister gives very quick answers, which is what I asked him to do. So, Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The prospect of the carnage simply resuming at the end of this pause is a really dreadful one. What is his assessment of the likelihood that if over a period of some further days all the hostages are released, then that the ceasefire might be made permanent?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman will have seen the statements by the Israeli government about the number of hostages to be released and the possibility of extending the pause in that respect. The view of the British government is that we should do everything we can to ensure the hostages are released as speedily as possible. And the longer that this pause continues, the greater chance there is for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza and for progress to be made.
Sir Michael Ellis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree that any ceasefire continuing should be linked to the release of more hostages? And is he concerned that Hamas are breaking the agreement in several ways, including by separating parents and their children when releasing one from the other, and they haven't even allowed the Red Cross to visit all remaining hostages, which has been a rule in conflict for over 100 years? Is he not concerned about these breaches?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm immensely concerned about the fate of all the hostages. As he will know, there were originally about 240 hostages, and as of midnight last night, 58 hostages have managed to get out. At the same time, 117 prisoners have been released by the Israeli government, and the sooner that all the hostages are out, the better.
Dame Margaret Hodge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like others, I felt a real sense of relief in watching some of the hostages that emerged and were reunited with their families yesterday. And the Minister said that this pause could turn into a one-off. It needn't. I just wonder, I know the issues are incredibly complicated, and I know it's only through international intervention that we will make progress. But I wonder if he could tell us what steps are being taken, not to get to the two-stage solution at this point, but to start a peace process between the warring factions, which will eventually, one would hope, lead to a two-state solution. What steps are being taken now by international bodies?
Minister.
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her intervention. She's